The ballroom smelled like money power and polished marble. It was one of those nights where everything gleamed too much, where laughter echoed like weapons instead of music. I was carrying a silver tray, balancing champagne flutes worth more than my week's paycheck, when a woman with hair so perfectly bleached it almost glowed, leaned in and whispered, "Careful not to spill, sweetie. That glass costs more than your monthly rent." She said it with that smile people use when they're daring you to react. I didn't. I just nodded, adjusted my grip, and kept pouring. That's what I did. Keep my head down, keep moving, stay invisible. But that night they would all remember me. I was 25, a single mom with a 4-year-old who thought peanut butter sandwiches were a gourmet meal. My uniform was crisp but plain, my curls pulled tight into a bun, no jewelry except a simple ring that once belonged to my grandmother. Nobody ever really looked at me when I served their drinks. I was the help, nothing more. And in a way, I liked it that way. It gave me space to watch. The ballroom was buzzing about one thing, a massive $10 billion merger that was about to be signed by tech giant Lucas Kensington, a man whose reputation was as cold and sharp as the crystal chandeliers above him. Kensington sat at the head of the table, surrounded by lawyers and investors, while reporters hung at the edges like vultures. The contract pages of dense legal jargon bound in leather sat like a trophy in the center of the table. As I topped off a glass of Dom Perignon, my eyes flicked to the contract out of habit. Words were like puzzle pieces to me, always had been. My dad used to call it my gift-seeing patterns where others saw chaos, and there it was, buried halfway down a page, a clause I'd seen before. Reverse asset transfer. My stomach dropped. I heard my father's voice in my head like he was standing next to me again. "This is how they take everything, sweetheart. One clause, one signature, and an empire crumbles." He died when I was 17, but he'd been one of the sharpest economists in the country, a man who spent nights at the kitchen table showing me how words could steal fortunes. I'd memorized every lesson he'd left me, every scrap of his notes. Mr. Kensington. The words slipped out of my mouth before I could stop them. "Don't sign that." It was like dropping a grenade in the middle of the table. The laughter stopped for half a second before it exploded around me. "Excuse me," sneered a shareholder with a diamond tie pin. "Did a waitress just interrupt a billion-dollar deal?" A woman in a scarlet gown gasped dramatically, her manicured hand covering her mouth. A man with a gold watch chuckled and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "She probably can't even read the document properly. Honey, maybe go check the kitchen." The heat climbed up my neck, but my hands didn't shake. I adjusted a napkin, set the bottle down gently. Page 42, paragraph 3. I said, my voice steady. "It transfers all of your company's assets to them in 30 days. Everything, even your personal holdings." The laughter faltered just a little. A lawyer snatched the papers like I'd insulted his mother, flipping through angrily. "This is absurd," he barked. "These documents were reviewed for months. You think a waitress caught something I didn't?" "Yes," I said simply. The room buzzed with whispers, smirks, the kind of energy you feel right before a crowd tears someone apart. My manager appeared, sweating bullets. "Maya," he hissed through clenched teeth, "you're about to get fired. Stop, right now." But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at Kensington, who had gone utterly still. His piercing blue eyes met mine for the first time all night, and something in his gaze told me he wasn't dismissing me. Not yet. "You're certain?" he asked quietly. I nodded. That was all it took to turn the room into a storm. Voices rose, accusations flew. People laughed at me again, louder this time, trying to drown me out. "She's embarrassing herself. Let's be realistic. She doesn't belong in this conversation. Sir, if you let this girl derail our deal, you'll look like a fool." Every insult was a familiar sting. I'd been underestimated my whole life. Teachers doubting I could keep up, bosses assuming I wasn't smart enough to understand their jargon, strangers assuming I'd given up on my dreams when I got pregnant young. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. "Let them think you're small. When they show you who they are, you'll be 10 steps ahead." I slipped my phone from my apron and sent a quick text. "Emergency. Need confirmation. Reverse transfer clause. Within seconds, a reply came from Dr. Victor Lee, my father's old colleague. Where are you? Those clauses are deadly. Sending proof. Don't let them sign. My heart pounded, but I kept pouring drinks, my face calm. Minutes later, the ballroom doors opened and Dr. Lee strode in like he owned the place. 60 years old, silver-haired, carrying a leather briefcase, he had the kind of presence that made even billionaires sit up straighter. Mr. Kensington, he said calmly, shaking his hand. I've reviewed the documents this young lady sent me. He laid out papers, screenshots, bank transfer records. You're not signing a merger. You're walking into the largest laundering scheme I've seen in 20 years. Gasps rippled through the room. A woman in pearls actually dropped her glass. That's ridiculous, roared Daniel Ross, the slick executive pushing the deal. This is slander. Dr. Lee's smile was razor sharp. No, Mr. Ross. This is evidence. He tapped his tablet and images of offshore accounts, DOJ documents, and FBI surveillance filled the projector screen. Your merger is a front to funnel cartel money through Kensington Industries, leaving it gutted and worthless within 90 days. Shall I keep going? The room exploded into chaos. Some executives tried to argue, others reached for their phones. Ross slammed his fist on the table. This is a setup. She's just a waitress. I pulled my phone from my pocket, pressed play, and his own voice filled the room. A recording I'd made earlier that evening in the hallway, him speaking Spanish, arranging to finish the operation tonight before the feds catch on. All color drained from his face. FBI said, a voice behind him. The doors burst open. Agents swarmed in, badges flashing, moving with a precision that silenced everyone. Ross tried to bolt, but they had him cuffed before he made it 3 steps. Lawyers scrambled, investors turned pale, and the platinum-haired woman who mocked me earlier sat frozen in her chair, mascara streaking down her face. As Ross was dragged out, he spat over his shoulder. You have no idea what you've done. People are going to come for you. I finally allowed myself a smile. Actually, I know exactly what I've done. The lead agent stepped forward. Operation Black Ice has been active for 18 months. Thanks to your evidence, we just executed 40 simultaneous arrests around the globe. He nodded at me with respect. Good work, Agent Johnson. That was the moment the room froze, not because Ross was in cuffs, not because billions of dirty dollars were about to be exposed, but because the invisible waitress they'd mocked all night had just revealed she wasn't invisible at all. 6 months later, I walked through the glass halls of Kensington Industries, not as a server, but as their new director of compliance. My daughter Lila now went to a private school where she had art classes and violin lessons where nobody whispered about where she came from. Ross was serving 20 years for racketeering. Half the executives from that night were either broke or under investigation. In my office, I kept 2 things on my desk: a photo of my father and a letter from the FBI thanking me for my work. I'd created an internship program for kids from neighborhoods like mine, teaching them how to catch fraud, how to decode contracts, how to see the traps people in power lay for those they think can't fight back. 23 corporate fraud cases shut down in half a year, and we were just getting started. The same platinum-haired woman from that night came to see me once, shaking and apologetic. I was wrong, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. About you. About everything. I didn't gloat. I just smiled and said, now you know appearances lie. Underestimating people is expensive. Sometimes I still hear Ross's threat in my head. People are going to come for you. Maybe they will, but I'm not scared anymore. I spent too long being overlooked, spoken over, underestimated. Now I use that invisibility as a weapon. They don't see me coming, and by the time they do, it's too late. So what do you think? Would you have believed me that night, standing there in a plain black uniform, tray in hand, warning a billionaire not to sign his own death warrant? Or would you have laughed like they all did? Tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated because of where you come from or how you look? And if you made it this far, hit like, share this story, and subscribe. Trust me, this isn't the last time someone like me will rewrite the rules.